Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and in today's video we're placing the factory doubled in on this 2007 Toyota Avalon. Now in this install we're going to show you how to remove the factory radio. We'll head to the bench, show you the new parts we're installing, including the radio, dash kit, and wiring harness adapter. We'll come back here to get everything installed. Let's get started. Now, a couple of things to note here. This Avalon, our goal is to retain the factory screen up above while replacing the unit down here with a double-din screen. Now, additionally here, our Avalon trim was actually equipped with JBL factory audio sound system, and so we want to ensure that we retain that as well for obvious reasons. Down below, we do have the tape deck. You may have navigation, or this may be just an open pocket depending on your trim. If you have any other trim like we do, we'll link those notes in the description of this video. Additionally, we've actually done an Avalon on the channel in non-JBL version years ago. It's one of our earlier videos. You're welcome to check that on out. That one shows us relocating this radio to the trunk area on the non-JBL trim, and that allowed us to retain that factory screen and all that data without the nicer Pac adapter that was just using a basic Metra harness. So if you want to see that video, we'll link it as well. Today we're going to show you how we're going to install this radio without the need to relocate any radio. Now, before we get the radio out, this bezel up and around the gauge cluster and steering column needs to come out because it's a layered approach. It's a layered panel. It sits on top of the dash bezel up and around the radio. So we had to pop this out, but to get to this, we have to start on this side. I do have a vinyl panel trim removal tool, and what we're going to do is start kind of working this piece out. Just like that. And we're going to kind of start here at the top. Now there's a trim ring up and around your key cylinder. Pop that out. We don't necessarily have to take it out. The rest of the bezel up and around the radio should be just held in with clips. I'm going to start just kind of popping this on out. Now what we're going to do is try to get this out. There's going to be quite a few harnesses connected to your heating and air controls. Go ahead and disconnect those. Each harness is going to have a little tab. You can press the tab and it should release the clip. All right, so we got that out. There is tape right here on this anchor here. We'll retape that and attach that. And then a clip here that we pressed in the tabs that came out so we can undo the harness. So we need to take this over to the bench because we have to swap out the lift pocket with the dash bezel. Now we're going to have 4 10mm bolts all the way around the radio. Go ahead and remove those bolts. It's also a good idea, if you haven't done so already, to remove the discs out of the CD drive. All right, once the radio is out, we're going to have some various harnesses to disconnect. Go ahead and disconnect those. With the radio out of the way, we're going to grab our factory dash bezel. We're going to head over to the bench to show you the parts that we're going to need for our install. All right, so here at the bench, the parts that we're using in today's install, first and foremost is the radio customers chosen to put in. It's this JVC KW-M785BW. It's a great JVC unit that features both wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. Now, to accommodate that in the factory bezel and dash location, we do need a dash kit. This calls for the Metra 95-8215S. And wiring harness wise, there's a couple of different options depending on your trim level. If you do the non-JBL trim, or if you have the non-JBL factory audio sound system, you can use the Metra harness that we use similarly in our past older video. But that does require you to relocate the factory radio to the trunk. In today's install, whether you have JBL or not, this Radio Pro harness by Pac Audio will actually retain that factory screen and data connections without the need to relocate the radio to the trunk. This is the Radio Pro for Toyota. It's the RP4.2-TY11. This is what we'll need in our install. This retains both the steering wheel volume controls as well and the factory amplifier if so equipped. Last few different little odds and ends. Our JVC also features an HDMI port. Customer wants easy access to it, and also has the USB port on the radio for wired CarPlay and wired Android Auto on the back of the head unit. So what we've also added is we have a little HDMI dongle to convert the HDMI micro D to standard size HDMI, and we have a flush mount adapter that has a USB and HDMI port built into it. So what we've done here is we unboxed our Pac harness. We have most of it here. We have the harness that goes with our aftermarket radio. Now our Pac harness comes with the main module, all the connections here. It also comes with those dip switches that you need to set before you get the radio installed. These are for steering wheel volume controls. You have to pre-program those. Now, this is the main output harness out of this. This is where most of our radio connections will solder into. And for the most part, these do follow aftermarket wiring guides color for color. On this side here, here's all the connections that connect into your Pac module. These ends, you're not going to use all the harnesses. You'll just use the ones that plug in, and we'll show you what we're going to do there with the specific ones we need here today. It comes with power, ground, and accessory connections. Those will connect into our radio as well, along with those guys. Now it does retain your factory aux if so equipped, so you can plug that into the aux input of the radio. Also has some analog navigation outputs. We're not going to need the analog connections in our case, because what we're going to be doing is actually installing this included harness. This goes through the OBD2 port, and this is going to pull in your parking brake, vehicle speed sense, and reverse gear trigger wire through the data of the vehicle, because it's not available within the dash. And so we're going to run this down underneath the dash and plug that on in. Now this plugs into this harness. It comes, this harness plugged in here. We've disconnected this because we found that this vehicle connector number 2 doesn't go to anything in our specific Avalon. So because data, this harness doesn't exist, and this is generally in the newer Toyotas where data is passed through, we have to disconnect the data connection there. And that's why we connected our OBD2 port into this connection, so it's going to feed the data into the module. This also provides an OEM 6-volt camera output, but we don't have a factory camera. If you did, it would provide a 6-volt output to power that camera. You would need a separate camera harness accessory, which we can link if you by chance had a factory camera. This will power that camera with that additional harness that you would purchase separately. So that's basically our harnesses here. What we're going to do is we're going to grab our main harness connection. We're going to go through these wires with our instructions here just to make sure they wire correctly. For the most part, it's going to be color for color. We've already stripped our ends. Today we're going to be soldering, so we have prepared our heat shrink. Now if you don't know how to solder, that's okay. You can use butt connectors, or even better, crib caps, because it's wire on wire. Just don't use wire nuts or twist and tape. It's just not designed for an automotive application. Alright, so we went ahead and soldered up all our connections here. In our case, it was color for color. Now, it's always super important to grab your instructions with the Pac module. Make sure you go through this, wire it up correctly here. And then additionally, you look at your JVC's radio wiring colors to just ensure that you're matching not just the color, but the function of the wire. Now, we preloaded our wire with some heat shrink. With our connections now cooled, we can move those up and over those connections. We'll shrink them down with the heat gun. Now what we also did is we tied in our parking brake wire to the main harness here. We also added accessory ground and an extra amp turn on, like we mentioned before, for additional accessories. Wires we didn't use. Our radio doesn't support a vehicle speed sense, which is pink, so we capped that off. We have an extra parking brake we didn't need. Brown is for manual stereo and volume controls for a radio we don't have. And in their instructions it says we don't even use blue, so we don't need those wires. Purple white is not pinned in this harness. It's actually a separate dongle on the back of the radio. So we kept this out, and we'll tap that in manually here in just a moment. And then what we're going to do at this point is we're going to wrap our harness with some high temperature tested tape. Okay, so we went ahead and finished prepping our harness, made it really nice and pretty. Everything's high temperature tested taped here and zip tied nice and clean with the 2 harnesses that we need for our specific vehicle. We have the long run that goes down to the OBD2 port for data, and then everything else is really provided here in this harness. We have our reverse trigger that goes to the dongle on the back of the radio, as well as the parking brake. We do have an aux and an aux input on the back of the radio, so we're just throwing this aux in just for the customer. At this point of time, we've already set our dip switches, and that's good to go. We're ready to set this off to the side and now focus our attention on prepping the dash kit. All right, so we got our dash kit here. Now we pulled it out of the package. FYI, your dash kit comes with a Metra 70-8114. I don't know why they include that here, because you need the rest of the harness here. It's super confusing, especially for those that buy this kit and think this is the only harness they need, which is super misleading. And so FYI, you won't need this harness, especially if you do the Pac harness. You will need this harness if you have the non-JBL and you relocate the radio to the back. This provides the access version of the steering wheel control module connection, as well as connection to your aux. In our case, once again, we're using the Pac harness. This is not needed. With our dash kit, kind of like in our last video, the dash kit does call for us to actually cut and modify this. Instead, we can shave the corners here to save this lower support bracket. So we're going to do the same here today. We like as much support here in this dash bezel as possible. Now, to get this out, we do need to remove the OEM pocket. All right, so we removed our pocket. The way we did it is we just removed the front plate with the 5 Phillips screws. We put it back together, and then we'll keep this with the vehicle in case down the road, if anybody wanted to reinstall the factory radio, they could. You see the 4 mounting locations. It'll go right in here. But obviously, like in the last video, the bottom part of this interferes with the bracket totally sitting. So we're going to get our file like we did before, and we're going to file down these edges. Okay, so we went in and used the multi-tool and a file, just cleaned up, just notched these 2 bottom areas. Still going to give the structure to this, and this will add the additional strength, and it fits in great. So what we're going to do, flip this on over and add the 4 screws. Now remember, use the screws included with the kit. Now, unfortunately, the bezel doesn't connect to the mounting brackets, and so it's not an exact science how deep you should mount your radio within the bracket itself, forward and back, because you don't want to leave a gap between the radio and the dash bezel. So you have to take it in a couple of times. We're going to go do that now and go try to get the right distance between our radio and the dash bezel. We're going to go ahead and use the screws that were included with the radio. We went ahead and on our radio got the perfect depth. Basically, it's right at the plastic bezel line on both sides. And we got these 2 screws in. They're nice and tight. So that's perfectly set here. Our dash kit's ready to go. Now we're going to go an extra step and add in our HDMI flush mount adapter. We already got the dongle installed for HDMI. This is totally optional because it has HDMI, and why not make use of it? Then you can simply dump an HDMI cable into the glove box. That's totally up to you. We're going to go an extra step because this flush mount adapter not only has that HDMI end, it's a 3-foot run, but it also has a USB Type A 3.0 jack that'll plug into our radio as well. So this will give us wired CarPlay, wired Android Auto, other usage out of USB media, and access to the HDMI input through this dongle. So there's a little center pocket where the 12-volt connection is. And we're going to drill and flush mount this, and it comes with a backing nut. And then we'll fish this through the center console up to the dash cavity area, where once we install the radio, everything will plug in. All right, so we're back here in the car. We went ahead and got our USB and HDMI flush mounted. We reassembled the center console. We have those cables now hanging out here in the dash cavity, ready for hookup. So at this point of time, we have our radio module by Pac. This will plug in. Now remember, we need to fish this down and plug this into the OBD2 port, which is kind of right above the gas pedal on the right-hand side of the steering column. There's plenty of space to run that right down through there. I like how much room is in this dash. Now what we're going to do is make our connections at the radio. Plug in our main harness. Plug in our secondary harness. Just like that. We're not going to use this smaller one. Now you have two antennas here. Generally one is going to be more so for reception and better connectivity for AM. Generally all you need for your install is this AM FM connection here. It's a larger Motorola antenna input that'll go on the back of the radio itself. Now with those two connections made, we're going to tuck our radio module down into the dash. There's plenty of space. I love how much room we have here. We're going to make our connections at the radio. We are doing a backup camera, so we're going to hook up our reverse gear trigger wire. Now remember, if you want to see that backup camera video, we'll link it in the description here. Just like that. Connect our USB, reverse camera input. We ran our mic and put it on the 8-pillar. And we also ran the GPS antenna included with the radio, and that's on the dash. Okay, so we made all our connections at the radio. Let's tuck everything back in the dash. Now we've already spent the time to get everything realigned before we've come to final assembly here. All right, so we got the radio all booted up. Everything's all nice and reassembled here. There's our USB and HDMI part down below. Everything went in. It's aligned, no gaps. It's actually looking really good. Hey, everything is programmed and working great with steering wheel volume controls. We retained the heating and air controls down below as well. And basically at this point of time, our radio install is all good to go. It's all looking great. So if you have any questions on what we did here, go ahead and post a comment below. If you like any of the parts that we use, we'll link those also in the description at your convenience, along with any other recommended videos and other parts for different trim Avalons. And if you want to see how we did the backup camera here, we can link that video also in the description, which walks you through step by step on how to do one yourself. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button if you liked what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time. We'll see you in the next video.